God is speaking, God is speaking. Do you hear? Do you hear? Trust and you will hear him. Trust and you will hear him. God is do you hear? Do you hear? Trust and you will hear him. Trust and you will hear him. God is love. Using joys, speaking in his wisdom, speaking in his mercy, calling, using needs, using joys, speaking in his wisdom, speaking in his mercy. Do you hear? Hear his heart. Trust and you will hear him. If you want to hear him, God is do you hear? Hear his heart. Trust and you will hear him. If you want to hear him, God is love, always love.
Let us pray. Most gracious and loving God, watch over us today as while we are in our self-isolation, while we are protecting our neighbor, while we are watching over those that are more vulnerable than we are, and as we assist those who are less mobile than we are. Watch over each one of us. Protect our health, protect our lives, protect our spirits. Lift us up into your creation in ways that benefit us, that give us an idea of your glory and your grace. And in all things, we thank you for the blessings of life that you give to us. Amen. A reading from Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 through 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I want to talk about our lesson from Acts today. In just an earlier section, Peter and the apostles and the disciples had come out of hiding. They'd been hiding in the upper room for a while. And on the day of Pentecost, they came out and they started preaching and teaching and bringing Jesus' message to the populace, to the people. And so a little time has elapsed, and everybody, the apostles, everybody started devoting themselves to this message that Jesus had brought out, this message that the apostles were now spreading into the area. And the people were starting to accept this message and understand this new way of being. Now we have to remember this was a Jewish congregation. This was mostly Jews in Jerusalem that this particular passage is talking about. But it would have also been some from outside of the Jewish faith, as it could have been some Greeks and some others that were there that were also part of this. In fact, as we move forward in the story, we see that this was actually multicultural. It wasn't just Jews anymore, but also a lot of Greeks had joined. A lot of the non-Jews out in the world had joined this growing faith, this growing understanding of how God was working in the world. Well, as time progressed forward and as the apostles were teaching and the disciples were listening and also starting to teach and grow in faith and understanding, and the word started to spread, they started working more and more in community together. They started working together to solve some of the social ills that the times had brought on. And in many ways, they started living in serious community, where they would sell all of their possessions, or sell their possessions and turn the money over to the congregation. And so then food could be purchased and then spread to the poor, and clothing and other things could be bought and purchased. And the wealth started to be spread that way. And so everybody started being taken care of by this new faith, this new understanding of how God was working in the world. Those that were, and again, it shows in this story, in this little passage that we have, that every day those Jewish followers would go to the temple, and I would imagine even those Greek followers, those new converts to Christianity, because we have to realize that Christianity at this time was still a Jewish faith. It was a sect of Judaism. It hadn't, actually at this point, it hadn't even been given the title of a sect, of a separate understanding of God. This was still part of the Jewish faith that Jesus was teaching. So they started acting more in line with what the teachings of Moses and the ancient teaching was. That's what Jesus was bringing out. He was bringing about that ancient tradition of hospitality, of caring for your neighbor, of trusting in the community, of living in a community of faith, which is what the original design was all about. And then somewhere along the centuries it had gotten lost. And Jesus had brought this old teaching back into the new community. So they started living in this way. They started sharing the wealth. They would go to the temple and they would learn and they would sit and they would understand and gain understanding of God's message in the world. And then they would go home or meet in community and share a meal and share meals together. And so they spent their time together in the temple, and they broke bread at home and ate their meal with joyous and generous hearts. Meaning that while they were worshiping in this way, God was lifting their spirits and giving them hope in the world. And this was causing the movement to grow. More and more people were following this new way of being, this new way of understanding of how God works in the world. The situation, the world we find ourselves in right now, is in some ways like this story. And I want to draw us to the point where we are still the apostles and the disciples hiding in the upper room. That's where we are. We're all at home. We're all isolating ourselves away. Those of us who are not essential workers that need to go out, the rest of us have to sit at home, and that is our burden. That is our difficulty to live through, while others go out in the world and face the dangers of the world because they're essential to go and keep things going and to keep us in health and safety. The rest of us, our duty is to be home, is to be in isolation. And so there is a comparison there in not as to why, but as to the results of the why. And that is that we are isolating ourselves away. And that's like what had happened shortly after the crucifixion and the resurrection. The apostles and the disciples were hiding at home, afraid to go out because of the dangers out in the world. And that's comparison in a way to how we are now. Well, what we see, though, in the story is that when they come out of hiding, when they come out of isolation, they work together again as community. They take care of each other, they watch over each other, and they live together, and they create a new world out of their isolation. They create a new way of being with each other from their isolation. And if that's not a message for us today, I don't know what is. That when the time comes for us to come out of our isolation, come out of our hiding, when we are allowed again to go back out into the world and perform our duties, do we want, in reality, the world to go back to the way it was? Or do we have an opportunity here to change, to be different, to be a new community. Just as in the time of the apostles, the time of those first generation of Christians, they have an opportunity to create something new as they come out of isolation. And we have that same opportunity. We have that opportunity to come out of this isolation, this period of self-quarantine, of hiding at home. We have the opportunity when we come out of this to create something new. We've already begun this. We see this. I see this on the news all the time, of how neighbor is taking care of neighbor. How someone who is elderly and can't get out, or who has a condition that makes it just so dangerous for them to get out, and their neighbor knowing of this helps. And we see this kind of community beginning to happen. This restarting of taking care of our neighbor. I pray this with all of my heart, that as we come out of our isolation, we also carry that idea of taking care of our neighbor with us as we come out of our homes and we start recreating our new normal. And I pray beyond all things that this new normal will be more in line with the way God would like us to live, taking care of our planet, taking care of our creation, taking care of the world outside, taking care of our neighbor, taking care of the stranger. That is what God has called us to do. And at this moment, at this place in time, we absolutely have the opportunity to make this a new beginning of a new way of being closer to the way God would call us to be, where we take care of creation, take care of our neighbor, and take care of the stranger.